belonging is when your full, bold, authentic self can
Right.
be welcome and loved. A lot of people use, show up as your best self. I was like, no, 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 no. I don't
Yeah.
want the mask. I don't want
Right.
the mask of best. I do want your best self, but I want your authentic self.
You are listening to 5 a.m. podcast. Your morning motivation starts here.
Welcome to the 5 a.m. podcast. I'm your host, Michael Clausen. Our guest today is a visionary leader who has shaped global culture strategies for some of the world's most recognizable brands, including Krispy Kreme and IFF, which is International Flavors and Fragrances. He is the founder of Innovation Unbiased and the host of the podcast, I Know I Belong When. From growing up on a farm in New Jersey to managing multi-million-dollar global initiatives, he has learned that belonging isn't just a soft HR value, it's a strategic movement that drives innovation and resilience. Now, as you share this episode with your friends, I want to thank our friends who've snapped a shot of our QR code and joined us over at buymeacoffee.com/5am podcast. And now, Christopher Bailon, welcome to the 5am podcast.
Wonderful, Michael. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yes, my pleasure. Always good when we get to have a good conversation. I used to often say that 5am podcast is like we're sitting in a diner having some coffee and lemon meringue pie, and as you do in a diner booth, you obviously eavesdrop on the people behind you. So
Yes.
welcome everybody. Christopher,
Yes,
you grew up on a farm in southern New Jersey. Uh,
I did.
Obviously familiar with those small town coffee conversations. How did that early environment and the work ethic of a farm shape your life and your approach to leadership today?
Yeah, so, growing up in a family business, one of the things that I learned is no job is beneath you. I could remember when I went into the corporate world, one of my first jobs, and we had somebody who had the role of a secretary in our office. And I was doing a lot of my own photocopying. And my boss came to me and said, that's Ida's job. And I went, yeah, but that's easy. Like I can do it. She's like, "No, you're taking work away from her." Right? And so but this concept of well, because I was like, "Well, she's got a lot of other work to do. Like I don't want to keep piling on her." And because the philosophy, I was like, "Well, I don't have something to do right now. And I can do my own photocopying, so I'm going to get that done." That's the farm mentality, right? When we were, I don't know, in a pepper field and I'm on my row and I get to the end of my row, once I got to the end of my row, I had to look to see who had the longest to go on their row. And I jumped on their row and we started to work, right? Because nobody took a break. Nobody got to go eat lunch or go to dinner until we were all done our work together, right? So for me, it was like, there's no job beneath me. We're all in this together. I'm going to get the work done. So that being understanding about self-worth and, how to just communicate with others. My grandfather taught me an early lesson when I was 7 or 8, when this was the time before electronic deposit of checks, and we would have to go give the checks to the workers at the end of the week, and they were Puerto Ricans or Mexicans that were working on our farm. And for whatever reason, when I was 7 or 8, one of the Fridays, they would always invite us in for dinner. When we were giving them their paychecks, and I refused to go into the house. And I said, "We eat over there." And I was pointing to my grandparents' house. Um, and he was like, "Oh no, right? Like, we get to eat over there because of what they do. They are not beneath you. They are welcoming into their home. You are going to go." Right. And so for me, it was this first moment of like, why was I doing this? Right. As a 7 or 8 year old, my brain was white man lives over there. We eat over there. People of color are over here. But what I did not know at the time, because I didn't have the words for it, right, was I was taking a racist act. And my grandfather saw it and said, "Christopher, you're wrong." And, but I mean, many, many weeks leading up to that, I would go in every time, have a meal with them. And after that, I did the same thing, and so it was an eye-opening experience for me at that young age going, "Nobody's beneath me."
Right.
Right?
It
Now
definitely, yeah, definitely
go ahead.
sounds like your grandfather was teaching you even I was going to say that like from my perspective that Christian value of everyone has value. The Bible says God doesn't see color, nationality. He just sees his creation. What a great experience for you to learn. And, the default setting for little children, I think back to some little children that I love having part of my life. They have to be taught to share. They have to be taught not to kick their siblings. It's really something how we need those people. We'll get into business mentorship in a minute, but there's like a parallel here of business mentorship and family member mentorship of how we value those around us. And so then as you progressed beyond the photocopy room into business, I'm sure you probably have some other stories where you were actually advocating for other people to maybe to fit in or to not be unnecessarily burdened or taken advantage of. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I would say that happened when I was in high school. I think people ask me, "Why do I do this work?" or "When did I get into this work?" And I was like, "I've been doing this work forever." This is the purpose why I'm on this earth. I could remember going and advocating for two men to buy the prom ticket at the couple discounted rate,
Okay.
and they weren't a couple. The reason why they were denied is because somebody deemed them that they were not in a romantic relationship. And I said, "Does it matter? They presented to you that they want to go to prom together. They are asking to get the discounted buy two tickets at the same time rate. Why are you denying them?" Right? And I'm a gay guy, right? And I was like, "Look, I'm not getting the discount rate because I'm going by myself. I don't have a date." But these two guys I know are not in a romantic relationship. They're just two friends. They're single. They want to say they're going to prom together. And I was like, I should have thought of the idea first.
Yeah,
Right? Like I could have
absolutely.
saved some money going to prom. But so for me, like it was the principle of the matter of who has the right to say you are or not in a relationship, right? Like that was the premise that it's like, boyfriend, girlfriend buying prom tickets together and they can go at a discounted rate. I saw the gay couples get the same experience, right? And so like, well, does it matter if they're in a relationship or not? And so like for me, like it was ingrained at that kind of early age. I also was in high school when Columbine shooting happened. I was leading up my high school's charge to make a banner for Columbine High School, right? To say we're sorry for what happened, right? And so it was just this early on instinctive of how to be empathetic, how to show that we care and that there's humanity in this inhumane world we have. Going back when I was in high school, right? And so for me, it started there. I was raised in the Catholic Church. I was very much told that because of my sexuality, oh, and my mother is a lesbian, we had no place in the Catholic Church. And so I have spent a lot of time trying to find faith communities that do accept who I am, right? So it started long before I entered the corporate world. Um, and for me also when I was in college, I did a lot of activism, much to the chagrin of the leadership of the institutions because I was a thorn in their side all the time. And when I decided that agriculture wasn't for me because the farm closed while I was in college, and decided to go into student leadership development, went and got a master's in higher ed administration, and I focused on helping the student organizations that had a social justice mission. Because when I was a social justice leader, I led our Gay Straight Alliance in college. Nobody taught me how to create positive change. People taught me how to create change, but didn't tell me how to, like, don't just drop the bomb. You need a plan after you disrupt the system,
Yeah, that's true.
right?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, you disrupt the system, then what? Because if you just disrupt the system, then the system's just going to fail. And so I had to learn that, and I learned that through other means. And so I want to be the person that's helping these student leaders or just social justice advocates how to create positive change. Don't just disrupt for disruption's sake, disrupt with a purpose. And that's just, I thought that's what I was going to be doing the rest of my life. Then with the downturn of the economy, 2008 to 2010, my job disappeared in higher education, moved back home. And then I said, okay, if I wasn't doing student affairs, what would I be doing? And I went, oh, I like kind of this leadership development, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the corporate world. And so then I transitioned into that. And then that's how I started to really understand how to do this work in a corporate setting, and advocate for the policies and practice and processes that would allow organizations to have a equitable workplace, a diverse workforce, inclusive leaders, and an accessible organization that's open to all people.
Right. So, in that fast-paced world of business, intentionality is a big deal, and it's often not talked about. And sometimes it's the first thing that gets dropped. Can you talk about that intentionality as an actor for good in the world of business?
Yeah, so I even talk about this in my own how I describe purpose because I talk about intentionality is about being present. It's about how you care and how you are paying attention. And so for me, that drives my purpose, right? Intentionality and clarity. And so the only way to be intentional is to actually be present with you, right? I want to get to know Michael more. And so if I want to be intentional about the relationship we are creating, I have to get to know you as a human. And the only way to do that is to spend time, to have conversation, to have a cup of coffee, whether it be at 5 a.m. or have a drink at 5 p.m. Name your
Yes,
drink of choice, right?
that's
Like,
right.
so it's about creating that human experience, right? And how are we showing up as humans to other people?
Yeah, that's right. And part of that is being authentic. I know some people use the word vulnerable. I like to use the word authentic. Now, you've faced some significant personal challenges, including surviving cancer. How did that experience sharpen your resolve to ensure that people feel seen and valued with what they might be going through, seen as a deficiency or in the workplace?
Yeah, so I think for me, so authenticity is key. I also am somebody who believes in. I talk about belonging is when your full, bold, authentic self can
Right.
be welcomed and loved. And a lot of people use, show up as your best self. I was like, no, 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 no. I
Yeah.
don't want the mask. I don't want the
Right.
mask of best. I do want your best self, but I want your authentic self, right? And because when you're authentic, we then can understand the good and the bad. And I think so. So for me, I truly believe in authenticity. Talking about these trials and tribulations that I faced in my life. You brought up being a cancer survivor. I think for me, that process taught me about self advocacy. Um, and also I had great doctors, right? I am only here because I had really good doctors that got me healthy. I am also only here because I advocated for myself. And I could remember there was a moment I needed to go in for another round of tests. And of course, it's not the doctors who do the test. They send you to somebody else to do the tests. And the conversation that the doctor was having with me and had been like, okay, so, we have these lymph nodes that are swollen. We need to do a biopsy. And we knew because the MRI saw that there were three lymph nodes that were inflamed. And and they said, okay, we're going to biopsy your lymph nodes. In my head, that said, we're going to take a biopsy of all three, right? And that was what was, I was going in, okay, I'm prepared that we're going to do a biopsy of these 3 lymph nodes. When I get there, they say we're going to biopsy these 2 lymph nodes. And I go, time out, time out, time out. 2? I have 3 that are on the MRI that say there's a problem, right? And um, so, but in that moment, right, I could have just said, no, well, I guess the people are no. I was like, no, stop. The doctor said I have 3 lymph nodes that are swollen. We're supposed to be taking a biopsy of my swollen lymph nodes. That means there are 3 that you need to biopsy. And there was like, I was in tears, right? Like I was on the table. I was practically bawling my eyes out. And I said, we are not doing the test until you talk to the doctor. And I hear the doctor's office tell me that they are okay with only taking 2 biopsies, right? Because, and now in the end, we only did 2 biopsies because the doctor did explain to me, like, okay, like this is the reason why we're doing it. Like, and so like I was able to understand. But what taught me was it's okay to advocate for yourself, right? Don't just take what somebody's telling you as, fact, right? If you feel that something is wrong, it is your body that you need to be in control of, and you need to be comfortable with the outcome, right? Because what I was saying to them is like, okay, you're going to take a biopsy of these 2. If these 2 come back negative, what would happen if the 3rd one was the one that actually had cancer in it and you didn't test that one? Right? And you could miss something. Here I am, data guy, right? Every data point matters, right? And so, so for me, it taught me a lot about self-advocacy. It taught me about how to make sure that I'm taking care of my own health. I'm still on a journey, right? The cancer may come back. That is something that is, is in my mind. But I have to take health precautions, right? To try to minimize the opportunity for the cancer to come back. Also be as healthy as I can, so when and if the cancer does come back, I am ready to fight it with everything I got, right? So being able to understand that you have to take control of your own self and be the person who is in the driver's seat of this situation.
Absolutely. And so then in all of this, I don't know the timeline, but you founded Innovation Unbiased. Can you explain the philosophy behind the name and how does that bias specifically hinder innovation in a corporate setting?
Yeah, so I came up with this name. I have been thinking about going out on my own and having my own consulting company for a long time. And so when I was going through a job search back at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, my husband at the time said, why don't you take some time and focus on your consulting company while you're job searching? Like, job searching can be grueling. This is a fun thing for you. Spend some time starting to build the business so that, you said this is going to be a long runway. So I took the time and really started to think about what did I want my business to be? What type of consultant was I going to be? The type of work I was going to do? And then what was I going to call it? Um, and the first couple names I came up with, I don't remember, but all I know is they were not available domain names in GoDaddy. They were already purchased. People already had those websites. And I was like, okay, well, I want my domain name and my business name to be the same.
Yes, absolutely.
um, and so I did a strategy session with myself and threw up a bunch of words that talked about, okay, so I'm a data guy. What does data have to do with all of this? What are the nouns and adjectives that would talk about data? Um, I'm in the belonging space, the DEI, all that work. What are nouns, adjectives, adverbs that describe that? And I whiteboarded it. It looked like, one of that Beautiful Mind scene, right? It's
Yes.
just like words everywhere. And then I just started to like pull words that like really started to mean something to me. And when I think about, how we got to Innovation Unbiased, it's as we all well know, innovation is key, right? You can't You can't be successful if you're not being on the innovative edge. However, innovation can be biased. And so one of the other things that I do is I talk about how to be an inclusive leader and what are the behaviors individuals have to espouse to be an inclusive leader. And one of the behaviors I talk about is being purposely unbiased, because we talk about unconscious bias. And so what is the inverse of that? Well, that's being conscious about the biases in which you have. I just don't want you to be conscious about the biases you have. I want you to be purposeful in being an unbiased individual, because that is going to mean you recognize what biases you have, and then you're going to take action to not let those biases have an adverse impact on the people and the world around you. And so the same way is I want innovation to be purposeful in not creating adverse impact in the world around it. And so it is, how do we create innovation in an unbiased world? I know that's very ideal, but that's how I got to the name, because I want innovation to not be biased. I want, if it's biased, you're not going to come up with really good results, right? I mean, we all say when we're working, in a scientific method, junk data in gets you junk result, right? So if you want a good result, you're going to have to put good data in. And so there are a lot of things we could talk about how to remove bias from AI and all those type of things. It's a whole nother conversation, right? But those are the type of things you need to be thinking about, is how are you removing bias from your systems in an organization so that when the result of it is creating an inclusive, innovative culture.
Yes. And so then how do you translate this concept of belonging into the language that a CFO or a board of directors might understand?
Yeah, so that's why I came up with the belonging formula. So for me, belonging equals equity plus diversity times inclusion to the power of accessibility. And so for me, it's equity is about your policy, your practice, and your process. How are you creating policies and practices that are equitable, right? What is your human rights policy? What's in your code of conduct? Do you have parental leave? Do you have pay equity analysis? All that sits in the equity piece. Then when you think about diversity, diversity is truly about the people that are in your organization. Do you represent the markets in which you serve? Um, if you are in West Virginia, your diversity targets are going to look very different than if you're in Atlanta, right? West Virginia is 98% white. Atlanta is 75 to 80% black. If your organization in Atlanta looks like West Virginia, you are not representing the market in which you are serving. And I'm not going to hold an organization accountable for 80% black employees in their organization in West Virginia. They don't have the market to support that, right? So diversity is about representing the markets in which you serve. And inclusion is about the behaviors. Are you acting inclusively? Are you acting unbiased? Do you believe in this, right? Are you being a nice person, kind? Then accessibility is about, can somebody get through your front door with a wheelchair? And somebody who has visual impairment be able to interact with your marketing? Can somebody come into your storefront and be able to order off your menu with limited assistance from an employee? Those are all the types of things when it comes to accessibility. Can somebody get to your store without a car? Right? Are you in an accessible space? Accessibility is not just about people with disabilities. It's about how can somebody access your product, and that the product can be a very wide ranging thing depending on if you're a brick and mortar store or if you're digital only or name it. But think about, how can people access your business, your community? And if access is cut off, what are you doing to open up that access? That's what accessibility is about.
Thanks for watching the show. Just a reminder that you can get all of our resources, other episodes, and read our blog posts at 5ampodcast.com. We want to let you know about Dr. Joseph Drolshagen. Are you in the wrong room? That is where Derek Chinners found himself.
These salespeople that are kind of lifers, I'm in the wrong room. This is not the right room. And so they call me in and they fire me.
But Derek was already prepared.
Immediately called Joseph. He said, "What happened?" And I said, I think this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I just got fired.
So, Derek, tell us what happened to your business after you called Dr. Joseph.
That was at least 4 times what we had ever done in a month previous.
See what Dr. Joseph can do for your business. Book a free 15-minute call at 5am.smtmethod.com. Now, you may not 4x your business right away, but ask Dr. Joseph what rapid growth is possible. Stop fighting your strategy and start shifting your identity at 5am.smtmethod.com. You developed this inclusive behavior model. What are one or two everyday actions from that model that any small business owner could implement tomorrow?
1 or 2 everyday actions, I would say is think about somebody's name, right? Before we hit the record button, you asked me, "Christopher, how do you pronounce your last name?" That's really important because you wanted to get my name correct. You wanted to make sure that I felt valued in this space, that you were pronouncing my name correctly. So getting somebody's name right is really an important task that you could do today, right? You practice it. I have people who come on my own podcast or even people I'm interacting with on a daily basis that when I see their name in a meeting invite and go, how am I going to pronounce that? That's a name that I'm not familiar with. Do you know what I do? I go to Google.
Yes.
I put it in Google and I'm like, how do you pronounce? And I find videos and I do the work. Because when somebody shows up to me, I want them to know that I took time to value who they were. So that's one. The other thing that I would say is, how are you showing up and being present? And truly being in the moment, so that people know that I know we have so many things that are distracting us and, it comes right here, right? What are you doing to put your phone on focus time? What are you doing to be thinking about how you are, especially in a global world, right? Especially us in the United States, we all think the world revolves around us. And so we send meeting invites that work for our time zone, but how does it work for others? And so I have this philosophy. If I am sending a meeting invite to somebody else, I'm sending it in a time that works for them, that is inconvenient for me. When I was in my global roles, I can't tell you the number of times I had meetings that were 2 a.m. Eastern Standard. Why? Because it worked for my colleagues in Asia. And they would say to me all the time, "Christopher, it's 2 a.m. your time. Like, you don't need to do." I was like, I'm not going to keep making you do the meeting at 2 a.m. your time, right? Because one, in that role as the chief diversity officer, I had a position of power. If I'm going and sending a meeting invite to somebody, can they really turn me down? No. So I have a position of power. And so I want to use that power respectfully. And so so there's just those things. It's thinking about how you're using your power in a way that is recognizing the human on the other side of the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Being kind. And so, speaking then of those global strategies, how did you maintain consistent culture of belonging when you were dealing with those different countries and names and languages and local norms?
Yeah. So I'll give you some really kind of high level ones, and then I'm
Sure.
going to dial into one specific one. So high level, translate stuff. right? We were translating documents into multiple languages. When we were evaluating our new intranet, we specifically went with an organization that did automatic translation, right? It used Google Translate to translate the English version. Now, did it work great at the beginning? No, we had to teach it. It was like the large language model. It was the kind of new AI, but we were making those steps, right? We were saying it was important because when I was at IFF, we had launched our diversity and inclusion. It was before the E got added, but we launched the program back in 2018. And when we launched it, the email that we sent out, the newsletter, we translated into 15 languages because it was that important to us. That was a couple tens of thousands of dollars to be able to do that for a global org, but it was important. Now, and it was all electronic. Interestingly enough, the country that had that read the newsletter in their native language was the Netherlands. The Netherlands speaks beautiful English.
Yes, they do. But they love their
But
Dutch.
they love their Dutch.
Yep.
So what this told me is that, and I got not just anecdotal evidence, I had individuals respond to me going, Christopher, this is the first time this organization ever put a formal document in Dutch to us. Thank you. Right? They could have read it in English and completely understood it, but they understood it a lot better in Dutch because that was their native tongue. Right? So how are you showing up for the other person?
Yeah.
Now, let me talk about how we show up in countries that don't necessarily, or cultures that don't necessarily believe or follow the same philosophy we have. So I'm going to give an example in the LGBT community space. My past organization, IFF, we operated in 60 plus countries around the world. 9 of those countries, there were government sanctioned homophobia and transphobia into law. Right there, you could be criminally penalized for your sexuality or your gender identity. In 3 of those countries, you could be put to death. Right, it was the sanction was death penalty. So we were doing a global inclusion survey for the organization, and we were piloting self-identification because we wanted to know like who our people are and how was our organization impacting different communities. And we had 2 questions on the survey. Do you identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual? Do you identify as a transgender individual? Now, in the 9 countries in which there was legalized homophobia or transphobia, and there were a couple other countries where there wasn't any laws, but the culture itself, right, deemed it to be unsafe. We took the ability away for people to answer that question. However, we didn't eliminate the question from the survey. We left it on there. And in the place of being able to answer, we put a statement. We said, IFF supports the LGBT community. We want you to know that we have your back. And it is the policy of IFF that we do not discriminate. Right? And so we did that for 2 reasons. One, we knew there were LGBT people in those countries that it wasn't safe for them to identify, even in an anonymous survey. But 2, we also wanted to make sure that our employees and leaders understood what our policy was. And so we were being globally consistent that we were supporting the LGBT community, but we were being locally relevant to make sure that we were not putting any of our employees in harm's way.
Yeah. And so then your own personal platform blends that data with storytelling. Why is data alone insufficient, maybe, to change a company's culture?
Oh, because you miss the human side of it, right? There are things like, let's take pay equity, for example. When we run the numbers in an algorithm and pick your platform that you want to run it in, right? Excel or whatever, it can miss points that can't be picked up in the data. And so when you run the pay equity analysis, the result that it gives you is what is called your unexplained gender pay gap. And so when you get this unexplained gender pay gap, you need to then explain it. And so you need to investigate, why is there this identified pay gap based off of the data that we put into the formula? Then there might be data points that we did not pick up that explain that this pay gap is okay. Or we go, there are no other data points to explain away this pay gap. It's a legitimate pay gap. We need to fix it. Right? So you just can't take data as face value. You need to go in and you need to apply the human side of it all. Right? I mean, AI is only going to take us so far. Right? And so you need to still apply the humanness and still, allow you need that human touch, right? You need to understand there's people on the other side of this. When I could remember early in my career, we were preparing for a layoff, and I was in the people analytics department, and I had to run the first, who are we going to lay off? Huh. And we ran the numbers. We did a predictive model to say, okay, how are we going to save money and all this stuff? And it produced a list. But there were some things that if we went off of that list, there were some people, just from a money saving point of view, if we were to let them go, they were the only person who did that job in the organization, right? So we would have lost that ability to do, and it was a vital service, right? So then it was like, okay, well, if we're going to keep this person to meet the savings that we say we need to meet, we need to go find other roles, right? That's where the humanness comes in, or, I know we had somebody at the time is like, oh, their daughter was just diagnosed with cancer. Is that really what we want to do with this person? Right. So some of that, you need to be human, right? Or, yes, they are going to be part of the layoff, but maybe we can delay it, right? Maybe we can find a different exit strategy for that individual. Or, hey, how do we offer you a new opportunity in the organization? We have open positions that maybe you can slip into. We might be eliminating your position, but how are we helping you stay within the organization to find something else? So you're not completely losing your paycheck. You might not be doing the job in which you thought you're going to be doing the rest of your career, but how do we help you transition into a new opportunity?
Yeah, and that's very wise too, to keep that business organization going, but also to think of the human needs. A company is nothing without its staff. There's no
Right.
profit whatsoever. Who cares about the customers? You can have all the customers you want, but if you don't have that staff, man, forget about it. Game over for your business. Now, I want to ask you then the flip side of that question of what happens to a belonging initiative when it has plenty of heart but lacks the data maybe to back up that heart.
It becomes performative. It becomes a feel good initiative and you don't actually create change. And so for me, what gets what gets measured gets done. Right? So if you want to change policy, if you want to make sure your organization is attracting a diverse workforce, well, then what are your policies and your practice in place to attract that diverse workforce? You also want to make sure that when the people get here, so the past organization, um, we saw that we were losing people of color like there was no tomorrow. Right. It was just like, for whatever reason, the numbers from exits were high in our people of color, specifically our Black community. But we also looked that we were hiring Black people at a very high rate as well. So we were hiring them and they were walking right out. We hired them in the front door and they walked right out the back door. So what that told us was, the data said we told a really good story, but then when they got here, the story didn't match what we sold them and they decided to leave. So then we needed to say, okay, what are we, find out what's going on, right? And then we figured out, okay, well, there's some cultural problems that we need to fix. There are some things that, and we created a targeted approach because the heart was there. The heart was, hey, we want to be able to increase the diversity. If it was a hiring problem, we are solving it left, right, and center. The problem is that they're leaving at a really high rate too, so we can never actually like reap the benefits of our really good recruiting efforts. It's because when they get here, the culture sucks. And so that's where we need to spend the time. It wasn't a hiring problem. Same way when we found out in trying to increase the number of female leaders we had in our organization. We had 50% women in our junior management pool. But when we got into our senior management pool, it was at 30%. And we could never get over that hurdle. Well, we ran the data. The data said if it was a hiring problem, we were hiring at almost a 65% rate of female to male externally. The problem was is that we were promoting 70% men with inside.
That's
So,
interesting.
right? And so then we was like, okay, well, it's not a hiring problem. Oh, and the data also tells us that once you get into the senior management pool, statistically, men and women had the same opportunity to advance. The problem was is that we were putting too many men into the senior management pool. So we didn't need to go create, because what I was initially told was go create a women's leadership development program for our senior leaders. And I was like, that's not where the problem is. I don't need to create a program for our senior leaders. They got that. We got that under control. The problem is that we need to go create some type of intervention to get more females out of the junior management pool into the senior management pool. So if we only went on heart, on what we felt like we needed to do, we would have went and created a program for our senior managers, which we didn't need. We needed to create the program to pull more women out of the junior management pool so that we could increase the number of women in our senior management pool. That's what the data told us.
Oh, that's good. That's an excellent example of why you need both of those things. Now, we're getting close, ladies and gentlemen, to wrapping up this conversation, but we do have a comment section, and it would be great to hear from you, get your thoughts. I mean, everybody's got those war stories from the cubicle or the boardroom or the janitor closet, as the case may be. So we always love to hear your comments.
This is what I do. If there's somebody who is like, I have gone through this conversation and been like, oh, wow, I have a bias that I want to tackle. Come have a conversation with me. Safe space.
Yes,
Right. I mean,
that's great.
that's when I was internal. If a leader came to me and said, Christopher, I think I got this bias of something. Can you help me? Your manager, your HR person would never know we had that conversation because you're coming to me and saying, I have identified a problem and I need your help. Now, if you then show that, if you did not come to me for help and you showed that bias in a meeting in a very public way, well,
Right.
then we're going to hold you accountable very publicly too.
Sometimes it's hard to find the people that you can talk to because you think the person is just loading his pistols behind his back or her back while you're
No, I'm
trying
going
to
to meet
share.
you where you are. I'm going
Yeah.
to meet you where you are. I don't expect everybody to be at the summit, or
Yes.
I'm nowhere close to the summit, right? I'm still on my way on a lot of things, but it's like rock climbing, right? If I'm already up the side of the mountain and I'm looking down at you and going, Michael, it's really easy. Come on up. And you're like, Christopher, I've never done this before. I don't know how. Can you teach me? And I'm like, I need to come down the mountain. I need to meet you at the base. And I need to go, okay, Michael, hand here, foot here, hand there. To help you get there, I need to meet you where you are. And the same way when we're talking about dealing with bias is I need to meet somebody where they're at, understand the journey that they took, and then help them move along the path towards a more inclusive leadership.
Christopher, I would like you to share with our listeners how they can get in touch with
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. So just search Christopher Barlone. You'll find me there. You can find me at the podcast, I Know I Belong When, my website, innovationunbiased.com. Send an email to hi@innovationunbiased.com. That will come right to me. I'm on all social media, so you can find me there. Just come on by, strike up a conversation, add a comment or two on my LinkedIn post. I would really appreciate that. Yeah.
you have a son in business school, I believe, and you've got another one
Yes.
who's still in middle school, loves the sports. What leadership lessons are you passing down to them about navigating this modern professional world?
What am I passing down to them? it's about being kind. How are you showing up with kindness? And there's a difference between being nice and being kind. And what I would say is go check out season one, episode 3, and there's a whole explanation of on I Know I Belong When about what's the difference between being kind and nice. Shameless plug. I think also it's about um, how are they making sure that they are using their skill set for good and making the world a different place? And how are they making sure that they are advocating for a more equitable world than which we currently live?
I love that distinction between nice and kind. It's good to have that distinction and know the importance of our words. Now, retirement comes for most of us. Your retirement dream involves a farm that grows food for local soup kitchens. How does this vision of community service feed back into the way you consult with business today?
Yeah, it's how are you being a good citizen? How are you showing up intentionally? When I joined Krispy Kreme, I said, "What are we doing for Charlotte? We are headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina. What are we doing for the city? This is our backyard. We need to show up with intention to the city in which we are headquartered. Yes, we have Krispy Kreme stores all across the country, and we need to be showing up intentionally in those communities too. But Charlotte is our city where we are headquartered. What are we doing for that? So how are we being good citizens? When I was at IFF, one of the things we were doing is we were going to build a new factory. And we use environmental justice as a pillar of deciding on where that factory was going to be to make sure that we were not putting it in a community that would be have disparate impact on them, right? So like those type of things, it's how are you showing up as a good citizen to the world, and how are you using your corporate dollar for good?
It's like how Jesus Christ said, "Love one another." And no greater love has any man than he laid down his life for a friend. And a lot of times you can actually extrapolate that truth into how we do business and how we
Yes.
function. So, Christopher, this has been an engaging and great conversation on how to lead with heart without losing sight of strategy. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and your insights with us today.
Absolutely, Michael. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a really great conversation, and I've learned a lot about my own self through this conversation too.
Cool.
So that's really exciting.
Well, that's great. Well, I know I enjoyed it and you enjoyed it. We know that those listening are going to enjoy it as well. So, for those of you listening in, thank you so much. If you want to dive deeper into Christopher's work, listen to his great stories on his own show, head over to iknowibelongwhen.com and you can find that on all the usual suspects for streaming and social media. So, whether you're a solo entrepreneur or leading a global team, the principles of belonging and being kind are the same, and they all start with each of us. So make sure to visit iknowibelongwhen.com to explore the podcast, learn more about building a culture of innovation through belonging. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please seize your day, enjoy those sunrises and sunsets and all those beautiful adventures in between. I'm Michael Clausen. We'll see you next time on the 5am podcast. Thanks for watching the show. Just a reminder that you can get all of our resources, other episodes, and read our blog posts at 5ampodcast.com. We want to let you know about Dr. Joseph Drolshagen. Are you in the wrong room? That is where Derek Chinners found himself.
These salespeople that are kind of lifers, I'm in the wrong room. This is not the right room. And so they call me in and they fire me.
But Derek was already prepared.
I immediately called Joseph. He said, "What happened?" And I said, I think this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I just got fired.
So, Derek, tell us what happened to your business after you called Dr. Joseph.
I think that was at least 4 times what we had ever done in a month previous.
See what Dr. Joseph can do for your business. Book a free 15-minute call at 5am.smtmethod.com. Now, you may not 4x your business right away, but ask Dr. Joseph what rapid growth is possible. Stop fighting your strategy and start shifting your identity at 5am.smtmethod.com.